Today's guest webinar is about the importance of real-time data capture in manufacturing. Our guest for today's webinar is OFS. OFS is a software company that has been around since 2005, producing a range of products that automate data collection from machinery and combine it with input and commentary from operators. This powerful combination of data is used to drive manufacturing efficiency and improves the profitability of manufacturing. On behalf of OFS, today's presenter is Sales Director Simon Gray. Simon is just one of their fantastic team who is dedicated to helping transition manufacturing into the digital world of Industry Internet of Things and Industry 4.0. So with that being said, let's get started with today's session, and I'll now pass you over to Simon.
Thanks, Nelson. Welcome, everyone, and thanks very much for taking the time to join us today. To say that demand for digital products and services has reached unprecedented new levels would be to state the bleeding obvious. As we speak, hundreds of millions of employees are relying on collaboration tools, and online processes to get things done. And if we think for a minute about the Zoom example, serving 10 million people at the beginning of this year, mainly for business meetings, now serving 200 million people for a broad range of applications that now includes running fitness classes. So things have changed really quickly. Or in our own case at OFS, we're using Zoom now for virtual site tours with our customers as a workaround to travel and site visit restrictions imposed on us. So things are changing really quickly. In today's discussion around adoption of digital technology in manufacturing, it's clearly a highly topical conversation given the circumstances we find ourselves in. So over the next 20 minutes, we're going to cover three main things. First of all, why the need for accurate and timely data has never been greater. Secondly, we're going to share some practical case studies with you just around how some manufacturers have used live data to solve problems that matter. And thirdly, how the software deployment process is being made substantially simpler for manufacturers. So let's jump into it, beginning with why digital now. And I guess just to think about this crisis we're all in and how we come out of it. And more to the point, what the next normal looks like for manufacturers. They're big questions that at this point in time still remain to be seen. But one thing's for sure is that we'd be naive to think that things will remain as they were. And let's just take a minute now to consider a few of the positives that have been realised as a result of this, rather than dwelling on the negatives. We've managed to reduce commuting time and costs and risk associated with being in our cars and on public transport. We're reevaluating our lifestyles. We've got new ways to connect and new ways to learn. And of course, there's the environmental impact. And I'm sure some of you will have seen the images of the colour of the waterways in Venice or the improvements in China's air quality. All of these things, plus more, tell us that companies will need to seriously rethink their operating models based on how people work best. And I have no doubt that the outcome of these reviews will be that companies invest more and faster in new digital technologies to support change. So how do we expect manufacturers to react? Well, that's a big question. But I think, to be fair, I think some will view it as an opportunity, and that opportunity will be to stay ahead of the curve, to optimize efficiencies and create more flexible working conditions or options for their people. Others, unfortunately, will be forced to make changes simply to survive. And then, of course, there'll be the ones who sit back and probably take a more conservative approach and follow the leaders, so to speak, wait until things have been proven out before they act. But whatever the case, the recent forced changes have proven to us that that non-essential teams can successfully do their jobs remotely. We expect to see the emergence of more specialist teams, remotely connected and playing a vital support role to reduced on-site teams. I've referred to it here as the virtual shift. And for example, let's just think about a few examples here. Live monitoring of asset health from reliability and engineering teams, or contractors might be one way that you can complete new tasks. In a similar way, continuous improvement teams and operational excellence teams can analyse OEE and other vital measures to run their PIPs and lean programs. When we think about non-essential staff such as sales and customer-facing roles, there's an opportunity for them to use live data, production data, to manage customer expectations. We're already seeing many good operations and production managers commonly using real-time factory data to manage site performance, often remotely, to avoid any unwanted surprises as they come into work. And I know I'm mentioning the word remote here, and I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that we're going to see this massive tidal wave of change that everyone's going to start working from home for the foreseeable future. But it's not about just necessarily remote working or having remote access to data. It's more about the efficiency and productivity gains that digital technologies facilitate. The last point I'm going to mention on why digital now is really around people, and it's arguably the most important point, because good people will always be the key to our success. And again, I think it's fair to say the impact on people as a result of COVID-19 will be profound. We're already seeing crews, work procedures and shift patterns that have been reconfigured. We're seeing frontline workers that are expected to upskill and take on new tasks. So there's perhaps no better time for organisations to cement themselves as a supplier of choice by arming teams with modern technology and providing an opportunity to learn best practice skills. Manufacturers are going to need to take this really seriously in terms of considering how they future-proof themselves to attract and retain the right talent in a highly competitive labour market, with more and more choices for future generation workers. And I think a great starting point here is going to be to provide leading edge technology tools that help people do their jobs more effectively. So we've covered a few of the drivers behind digital and why the need for timely and accurate data has never been stronger. But what does this mean in a practical sense in terms of how you apply it and actually get real outcomes as a result of using real-time data? I'm about to share 4 very different case studies, each with unique problems to solve. And to summarise each of those problems, the first one is around a butter manufacturer that couldn't supply enough. The second one is around a new machine purchase that didn't deliver to plan. The third one's around a paper bag maker that had an expensive rework program. And finally, a quality process that was inefficient and untrustworthy. So let's jump into the first one. And as you can see here, we're focusing on Fonterra and their Western Star manufacturing facility down in Cobden in Victoria. Hello to anyone from Fonterra who's on the call today. They had a very clear problem that was around capacity constraints on their tub line. And this is a picture of the tub line, as you can see here. And the problem they had was that they couldn't keep up with supply demands. In fact, they had a 30 tonne per month problem. That was what they worked out that the problem was equating to. There was lots of speculation, assumptions, not enough facts. The simple answer, of course, was just to go and put in a request to upgrade all the equipment. But the investment was circa $5 to $10 million, depending on the spec. So they had to think of other options. The task itself was really, in a nutshell, to better understand and quantify where the disruptions were taking place so they could put in some corrective action. So they used data from line sensors and a series of methods to capture and identify all the time losses and reasons using OFSX. On top of that, they had a bunch of analytics tools that they were using, which allowed them to trend data over time. And as they delved into the information coming out of the system, they learned two key things. First of all, as I mentioned, they had a serious 30-tonne problem per month in packaged butter that was costing them. And the second element to what they learned was that the key culprits, if you like, were the tub loader and the foil applicator. So they were both causing significant problems. So after a bunch of researching and considering a number of options for a fix, the team down at Cobden raised a capex worth approximately $250,000, which is a fraction of the cost of the replacement equipment. And the capex was subsequently approved in 1 week. So a great outcome there, and a really good example of how you use data to support investment cases. But the results were more impressive. So first of all, they managed to reverse all of their lost hours. But secondly, they managed to increase their run speed by 35%, which resulted in an increase from 310 to 420 tonnes per week of butter produced. So an outstanding result there. And for the first time, they now find themselves in a situation where they're able to make more butter than they can sell. So a terrific problem for Fonterra to have, particularly their sales team. The second problem or case that I'm going to focus on today is with Bizzy, and this is their beverage cartons making facility out at Broadmeadows. And this is a case of where data has been used to monitor performance of new equipment purchases, but also on a secondary front to actually use data to hold your suppliers or your vendors to account as well. So let me explain a bit further. First of all, in a similar vein to Fonterra, Bizzy had some supply issues. They'd managed to secure some new work, but they had insufficient capacity from their existing machines. So they made the call to go and acquire a multi-million-dollar new 8-colour press with all the bells and whistles. But one of the key selling points of the new machine was the speed of job changeovers. So what they observed during setup and commissioning phase was that they were consistently falling short in terms of production targets. So with inline performance monitoring, Bizzy started tracking to the second where their losses were, including at each stage of the changeover process. And what they determined as a result of their review was that their run speeds were actually really good. They were meeting nameplate speeds, but the job changes were horrific. In fact, the target changeover time of 16 minutes was being missed by a long, long way. And in fact, the actual time for job changeovers in totality was 90 minutes. So it was out by almost a factor of 6. The result of all of this was that Bizzy and their supplier entered a renegotiation of the sale contract, and the savings to Bizzy ended up being $1.5 million on the price of the machine. So a significant win for them. But they also discovered something else really important using the data from OFS, and that was that their standard stops were wasting 150 metres of printed paperboard. So, not an insurmountable amount of paper. And yet, when they were hitting the e-stop button, the emergency stop button, they were only using or seeing 50 metres of waste. So a difference of 100 metres in printed paperboard, or in dollars terms, roughly $25 to $30 per stop. So you can imagine the press was subsequently reprogrammed to minimise raw materials and add some further gains to Bizzy. And all of this again is using live data to help justify their decision making. The third case that we're going to talk about today features another packaging producer who will remain unnamed, but let's refer to them in this case as our customer. And in this case, our customer was experiencing some gluing inconsistencies on their paper bag making machines. So for the main part, I guess, what they were seeing was sporadic instances of glue misfires, or in other words, bags were being sent to end users with bases unsealed. So not a good problem to have. They were also seeing instances of either too much or too little glue dispensed. So they had a number of problems there that were really culminating in strained relationships with customers and particularly unhappy shoppers, as you can imagine. Add to that, it was a costly drain on internal resources in terms of managing investigations and recall processes. So something had to be done to fix it. Their initial task was to focus on the bigger problems, which is the bags that had no glue at all on them. So they had a focus on identifying each time the glue dispenser heads were misfiring. So our customer wanted to know specifically each time an out-of-spec bag was made. And then from that, their desire was to trigger a call for operators to take action. So what we did was we installed an additional line sensor on the glue dispenser and linked it back into OFS. And with each and every exception, the operators were able to see this displayed on their operator console, but there were also options to flag these exceptions via SMSs and using other alert methods. So what it meant was that not only were the exceptions highly visible, but the operators knew every time an out-of-spec bag was produced, and that prompted them to stop the machine, remove the faulty bags, and rectify the problems. So in terms of the outcomes, there was clearly an immediate lift in product quality. So bags were going out to customers in a much better state. The analytics and reporting capability that is in place now means that any future issues can be traced back to machine and production time for further root cause analysis. So there's a much higher level of traceability involved in all of the bags that go out to customers now. The pilot on the one machine that we trialled was such a success that approval has now been granted to more than 300 machines globally. And as you can imagine, supply relationships with this particular customer have begun to improve substantially. Plans now also to expand the scope of work are in place to improve glue distribution consistencies across a range of different running speeds. So they're really now honing in on how they can ensure that there's a good distribution spread of glue across all of their bags. So another great outcome for one of our customers. The final case study I'm going to feature today is around Asahi Beverages, and they had a few problems with their quality systems and all their paperwork. So specifically, they had just accumulated huge numbers of check sheets over time, and they had no standardization across sites for managing quality. Their operators were swamped, in fact, having to fill out check sheets every 15 minutes, which was clearly distracting them from core tasks. The paperwork was often error-prone or even illegible. And to cap it off, there was a duplication of effort with information having to be re-entered into a database at shift end. Basically, operators saw no value or thought it was a complete waste of time. So the task they had was, in a nutshell, to make the process simpler and easier for everyone and to build trust back into the process. So Asahi went about digitizing their check sheets. And what I mean by that is essentially creating electronic forms and workflows that were presented to operators on a screen at precisely the right time. And during the testing phase of this, Asahi observed that lots of missed checks were appearing, which was a bit of a head scratcher for them. But on review, they found first of all, that there was a lot of duplication. So I'll show you a picture here of some of their forms and the way they went about trying to reduce some of that duplication, because they just had stuff going on everywhere. It was a mess. But further to that, they worked out they were asking too much of their frontline team. So there was just too many checks to perform. And that initiated a change from them from I guess, a time-based check to a unit-based check. So think of that in terms of, instead of just automatically going and having to fill a form out every 15 minutes, it was more about, say, filling out a form every 5,000 units or whatever the number was that they determined was the right number. And when you think about that, it makes no sense running 15-minute product checks when you're actually in an extended downtime. So that was one of the ways that they reduced their downtime or their check sheets. In terms of results, the results were outstanding. They managed to reduce their check sheet numbers from 1,000 to 300 over 4 sites. So a terrific outcome. You can imagine that the operators were delighted with the time savings, as were the supervisors and QA managers, delighted with the changes in data integrity and the reduced administration. Audits have since become a simple task because they can access records in a heartbeat. And as a result of all of this, Asahi decided to roll the project out on a national basis across all of their sites. More recently, Asahi have commenced using digital check sheets for traceability applications and specifically to trace raw materials. So I'll give you an example. Following a series of costly product recalls that they had, which saw diet labels applied to standard soft drink bottles. So you can imagine the ramifications and health risks around sending the incorrect product out into the marketplace or incorrectly labeled product. So what they've done is now they are, with each label reel change, they're scanning the barcodes on the labels, and the information is being automatically populated into forms, which now means operators are instantly notified before they start running the job. So in effect, they can't run a job with the wrong label. So I'll finish up there on the case studies, but just before I do, I want to mention a couple of things about each of these. And the first thing is that in each of these cases, the manufacturer had a clear problem to solve. That's obviously integral to the success of these projects. The second part to this was that timely and accurate data was crucial to delivering a successful outcome. And the third part that I want to point out is that you don't necessarily need to be a big business to solve big problems. I'm conscious that each of these examples featured industry leaders, but these activities and benefits can be realised regardless of the organisation size. So yeah, please don't think for 1 minute that you need to be a big business to solve these. So I'm going to move on now because I'm conscious of time to our last point, and this is around the rollout and reduced rollout complexity, because as we're seeing technologies evolve, they're becoming easier to access, they're becoming easier to use. The expectation is that they're easier to roll out as well. And when I look back even a couple of years, things were very different back then. I think about, you know, when we're out speaking to customers and the conversations were around hardware and networking, really limited options. We were talking about on-premise servers and cabling everywhere and, you know, installing line sensors, and it was more costly from a CapEx point of view. It was a more complicated discussion and it almost always involved IT folk, which could sometimes be a barrier to entry. Business back then were, of course, a little skeptical of cloud services. So most of what we deployed did involve multiple hardware devices. and those hardware devices, including the on-premise servers, were all managed by in-house IT teams. Today, things are considerably different. There's a raft of new IoT gateway devices making their way onto the market, and these are designed to simplify the task of acquiring and marshalling tags from a range of legacy sources. So think about things like temperature and pressure readings, fault codes. All of those things now are being made significantly easier to bring into systems like OFS. Mainstream cloud services have provided a secure platform to host software and allow users instant access to data. So we're seeing now 9 out of 10 OFS deployments opting for a cloud-hosted service. So what does all this mean? Well, it means basically that risk, cost, and effort are being significantly reduced. And hopefully here you can see a diagram which many of you will be familiar with, because I know a number of the people on this call have been through the OFS Express evaluation program. And this program here is about making that whole experience significantly easier. And many of our customers will have deployed this program within mere days, depending on how committed your teams are to putting this program in place. But we're really talking about days to put this in place with minimal effort and minimal pieces of hardware. In fact, I should add that the most recent developments for small to medium businesses with less complicated lines has seen us go live with our last 4 customers in less than 1 hour. So we are just getting faster and faster at helping our customers deploy these systems. I'd like to finish up now just with, first of all, saying thank you, because it's difficult to get lots of people's time at this stage. So firstly, thank you to all. But I'd like to offer a free 30-day trial here to everyone and any of the companies on this webinar today who are keen to see what value digital technology can bring to their organisation. So please register your interest via our website, and we'll be in touch to discuss not only how we can have you set up and running in a matter of hours, but also how we can support you with some complimentary training from one of our friendly customer success representatives. So thanks again. I think I'm running out of time now, but stay well, and I look forward to a few questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Simon. And as Simon said, if you have any questions, please type your question in the control panel box and he'll be happy to respond. We do have one question here, Simon, from Caesar. He asks, will the data entry in OFS be done directly by the operators in the line?
That's a great question, Caesar, and hello. Caesar, there's a number of ways we can do this. You can have the data entered by operators, if you like, or you can combine it with a combination of tags that come from your machines as well. So you could have a hybrid. It's ultimately up to you. We think that initially the best way to get started is to engage your operators and have them take some ownership over entering some of the downtime reasons themselves. But what we're seeing from customers is that as they become more advanced and want to have more information integrated into OFS, that automatic tags are becoming more and more prominent.
Okay, thank you very much, Simon. I think that answered the question. Doesn't seem... Oh yes, we do have another question here. What's the scope for the 30-day trial in a multi-stage plant? And this is from Graham at NiStar.
Sorry, I just missed that, Nelson. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, what's the scope for the 30-day trial in a multi-stage plant?
So,
is it limited to a single line example?
Yeah, look, our preference is to start on one line. If you thought that benchmarking a couple of lines was going to add significant value, we would entertain that. But we find that starting small and phasing is the best approach. But my short answer to that is I would take that on a case-by-case basis.
Mm-hmm. Okay, no worries. And I think one final question here from Stephen. Does this have other modules to integrate quality checks? And also, can it integrate with the SCADA system to capture items within it?
So I'll address the second question first of all.
Mm-hmm.
OFS is fully capable of integrating with other systems.
Okay.
That the devil is always in the detail in terms of what integration means. So I'd be happy to take that offline and have a separate conversation around that.
Yep.
The first question around other quality modules, OFS Flow is a dedicated quality module. So I'm probably just a little bit confused as to whether you'd be looking to add a secondary quality system in, or whether you're talking about using OFS Flow, because that automatically integrates with the OFS X line performance monitoring system.
Okay. Yep. I think it's probably something we can talk offline about. So anyway, I think that's the end of the questions. And then just as a reminder, a link to the recording of today's webinar will be provided in a follow-up email to you later today. So please feel free to share it with your colleagues and go over it again. And that brings us to the end of today's session. We'd like to thank Simon and OFS for coming along and presenting today's webinar. Hopefully we can do this again in the future, as we got quite a few attendees, which was great. And obviously with technology continuing to evolve, this is a product that a lot of companies will be looking for. And for all our attendees, we hope you took away some learnings from the session. A feedback form will pop up on your screen after the session. So please let us know how it went, and if you have any topic suggestions for the webinars in the future. Thanks again, Simon and OFS, for attending, and thank you everyone for attending. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.